Chris and Chris Talk Business.
Hello, this is the Chris and Chris Show. It's good to have you with us. I'm Chris.
And I'm Chris.
And we are talking about business. And today I've got a friend, Troy Albee. Troy and I go back a way. We were on the same presbytery. You're still on that presbytery, but I am now in the Pacific Northwest. But good to see you again, Troy. And fill us in a little bit on who you are and where you are.
Yeah, well, today I'm talking to you from Norwell, Massachusetts, which is on the south shore of Boston. It's been our home. My wife and I, my wife Krista, we moved here almost 16 years ago this fall with the purpose of planting a church. And we're in Plymouth County, which is, the best way to describe it is we're halfway between the city of Boston and Cape Cod. And we felt called to move here, like I said, to plant a church. And it's been quite an adventure. And I'm originally, although my accent, obviously doesn't sound like I'm from the Northeast or from New England. I'm originally from the Carolinas. I grew up in Western North Carolina and went to school at Furman in South Carolina and went to seminary and kind of blasted through all of that and then headed right into ministry in my early 20s. So now I've been a pastor for, I guess it's coming up on 23, 24 years. But the majority of that time has been here, church planting and establishing a church. The name of our church is Grace Presbyterian Church. And you can learn more about it at gracesouthshore.org. I haven't written any books. I don't have much to show.
No books. I love that.
I've got 4 great kids though.
Yeah.
And they range in age from 20, our oldest who's a sophomore in college, 18, 16. Both of those are about to graduate and head off to college in the fall.
Wow.
And then our youngest will be the last one home. He's 14. So we have a boy, a girl, and a boy.
Yeah.
And I have a fantastic wife who plays violin every Sunday at our church. And she's, involved with all kinds of ministry. And she's a school teacher part-time at a small classical Christian school here on the South Shore. And I'm really blessed by her counsel and her companionship in ministry.
Yeah, this is something, of course, I know about. But there are some things that we want to get into a little bit that maybe people wouldn't think. A church planter from North Carolina living on the South Shore of Boston. I mean, just that's a story in itself. I mean, anybody who knows anything about New England and about the South would say, how's this working? But you've had some really marvelous success planting the church. It's great to see that it's healthy and growing, and you got a building that's new to you. I'm guessing it was an old Congregationalist building that you guys acquired. How old is it? And tell us a little bit about that whole process. Because
Sure.
I think a lot of folks who are outside of New England, when they see those old kind of, white clapboard buildings and they see the rainbow flags out in front all the time and they wonder,
Right.
So tell
Right.
us, fill us in on a little bit on that.
Yeah, so we started with just a handful of families that were interested. They were meeting in a Bible study that were interested. And it's been a great area to live and to raise our kids, but our heart was really geared towards, my heart is really geared towards both kind of entrepreneurship, my love for the local church, and really just enjoying evangelism. And this is a place that's right for that. And so we just progressively, gradually grew as a church and particularized and developed leadership and infrastructure. But we kind of hit a crossroads about 2+ years ago when we realized that the space that we were renting from another church, they needed to have space and grow and expand. We needed space to grow and expand. Couldn't do it in the same space. Began praying in earnest, began kind of casting the vision to our congregation. Didn't have a whole lot of money. Not that even if you had a lot of money, it wouldn't go that far.
Right.
Here in New England, real estate is extraordinarily expensive. And so it was really like a trust God, like, please open a door. We talked to the diocese of the Roman Catholic Church here about some closing places that were closing. They weren't interested in working with this. And so we really felt like, wow, I don't know if this is going to work. And we were informed of a congregation that was going to be closing only a mile and a half from where we were worshiping. And it was United Methodist Church. A congregation dwindled down to about 15 to 20 people. And they heard about us. And so I called up the trustee or the leader of that church and I said, hey, we're interested in having a dialogue there. Well, we are too. We'd like to see this stay a church. We haven't talked to a realtor yet. And I said, well, don't do that. I'll be over tomorrow morning at 9:30. And, I kind of gave the pitch on, why choose us and why this might be. I said, we're a church, of about 140 or 50 people. Typical Sunday, we've got 90 adults and 40 children under the age of 12. And, we are a simple, Christ-centered, traditional church that would love to stay here on the South Shore and be here long-term as a worshiping and witnessing congregation. So we hit it off with them. They were incredibly generous, kind to us, and they were thrilled to see this transition. They gave us an amazing deal, relative to what real estate could fetch here in the area. And all the neighborhood is thrilled. We've got 3 acres here. I'm sitting in the little pastor's study, and our fellowship hall across the way is a 175-year-old sanctuary that has never burned down, and it has all of its integrity and charm and character. And we've only done a few little enhancements. As I mentioned, we're in the process of, before the show, we were talking about the parsonage, which is here, and it's a little dilapidated. We're going to tear that down and have some parking, but we have a beautiful fellowship hall, classrooms, nursery, just a lot that we can do, and a facility that I think is going to serve us for a very long time, Lord willing. And if folks wanted to learn or see more of the details of that, our website for that campaign, which we kicked off over a year ago, is anchoringgrace.org. I think, is it anchoringgrace.com? Well, it's one of the two.
Yeah, we'll put the link in the show notes. We'll get it right, and we'll put the link in the show notes.
And when you go there, you'll see, you'll catch a little bit of a window into it. And we would love to continue to raise additional funds with hopes to expand the sanctuary with its kind of historic continuity and have some more space for worshipers. And we've seen God's brought people. We've only been here for 9 months or so, and we've seen God, bring visitors and new faces and new opportunities in the neighborhood to connect and invite and share the gospel. And some of those folks are expressly folks that don't want to go to a flag-waving church.
Well, this is one of the things.
They're refreshed when they say, well, there's no flags here. There's not even, an American flag here. And I'm like, yep, that's great. So
this is one of the things that folks who are unfamiliar with New England may not have an appreciation for, and that is New England is being re-evangelized, and a lot of the old buildings that these liberal congregations had been in for a period of time, those congregations have dwindled away and are now being repopulated with churches like the church you serve, Troy. I can think of like a half a dozen off the top of my head in Connecticut and New Hampshire and other places. Anyway, we want to get into some other stuff because there are some things that you've been involved with that maybe people wouldn't associate with a pastor. And that would be fun to talk about this. I remember a conversation we had at Presbytery over lunch one time, and you just kind of said something in passing, and I said, wait, what did you just say? Tell me more about it. So you've been involved in some fun kind of side gigs, I suppose you could say, that I think are worth learning about and hearing about. So I know there's more than one, but the one that I would like to kind of start with is the key fob sort of story. So can you give us a little bit of background on how you got into the whole world of like car keys?
Sure. Sure. Well, when we first arrived here, I've always had, kind of an interest in doing a side gig. When we lived in Durham, Chapel Hill area prior to moving here, I would have, bills that I needed to cover and provide for our family. An emergency C-section bill comes in the mail. Where am I going to get, where am I going to come up with $2,000? And that was really during the rise of Craigslist. And in a college town, that's like, it's fishing in a barrel. There's tons of opportunities to pick up stuff. So I began kind of flipping various things, appliances, cars, whatever I could kind of come across, made a little bit of money. And so when we moved up here, it was in the back of my mind, it'd be nice to start a side gig. But those first 3 years of church planting, it was just all hands on deck.
And how let me stop you. How old were you when you were starting these hustles?
When we moved up here, I would have been like 32.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'd never done any other work. I went straight, like I mentioned earlier, straight from college. And and right into seminary, and was ordained at a very, very young age, probably too young. So really ministry was all that I knew up until this point of moving into New England. But in the course of being here 3 years, it's a very expensive place to live, cost of living and other things. And then we were raising children. I thought to myself, it'd be nice to have something. And about that time, I got in a car accident. And so I was cut off by a postal worker and ended up having to go pick up another car off Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace would have been the choice nowadays. And it only came with one key. And I found out, by calling around, it was just an old beater, Honda Civic, simple transponder key that I found out, the dealership wanted astronomical amount of money for that, $180. And I was like, well, I got to find somebody. I finally found no hardware store were doing these keys. I found a guy a couple towns over who would do it for $100. And I was like, well, I mean, that's better. And I need to have the convenience and the safety of having a backup key. So I started researching. I even talked a little bit with him, and I found out how much the part was, and it was $9. So I knew there was a considerable profit margin there, and I just started researching it. And somehow with our taxes that year, we actually got a refund. And I looked to my wife and I said, hey, honey, what do you think if I use this tax return and start a business? And I'll call it Affordable Keys. And that URL.com is available. And I found a hardware store on the North Shore of Boston that was closing, and they had some of these key cutting equipment and the transponder programming for cars. So I was intrigued, started going to some trade shows, watching YouTube videos, buying some equipment, and then that just really progressed. And I've always enjoyed working with my hands. I've done most, repairs on my house myself, but this was kind of a new area to probe and learn and discover some ways to do it. And locksmithing was, kind of like solving a puzzle. And in a lot of ways, especially nowadays, because it's not just the mechanical key, it's a transponder chip that's inside the head of that key that is an anti-theft immobilizer that most cars have. And then there's a transmitter that has buttons. And then, of course, a lot of cars nowadays, as you probably well know, have intelligent keys, or what we call proximity keys. They're in your pocket or your purse, and you just hit the button on the dash. Well, the dealership wants you to think that only they can do that, which is not at all true, maybe with the exception of brand new Mercedes-Benz. So I just thought, I think there's something here. And so I started it out of the church office we were renting above an Italian restaurant. and just started cutting keys on the side. And before I forget to mention it, the really cool thing about that was that, in starting a business, you can do all kinds of things with that, writing off expenses, structuring, certain things to your tax advantage and financially. But it also gave me tons of opportunities for evangelism.
Right.
And I would have people come sit, in this,
Hold on. This is like a perfect picture. I will give you your key, but you must first listen to my evangelistic presentation.
my elevator speech for Jesus, which I'm not shy about doing. And my kids and my wife will testify. We had several, times where I would have someone sitting there and they would say, hey, you don't need this many books to cut keys, do you? Like, no, I don't. Like, so what do you really do? And well, I'm actually a pastor. And that opened up, I've had opportunities to share the gospel with hundreds of people and pray with people, minister to people that are struggling. I had a couple one time sit down and they noticed that I had some counseling booklets, and they just opened up about having a special needs child and their marriage was struggling. And I just listened and prayed with them, and we've invited people to church. And many of them don't come. It's just like anywhere else. You invite folks and they say they'll come. But we've had some that actually have, and some really cool stories have come out of that, including a woman who came to faith, and we were able to baptize. And she went back up to Vermont and led her family her mom and dad to faith before they died. I mean, it was just, and she looked at me one day and she said, Troy, how did all of this happen? And I said, well, I got in a car accident and I started a business, and that's how we met. And she ended up in our church. So really cool stories along the way. But I'll pause there. Maybe there's some follow-up questions. I can tell you where it's expanded from there, but maybe there's a tie-in or a question.
Well, I do think that there are some questions.
Lots of questions.
Oh, yeah. Like one, you had an eye for this margin that was fat. In other words, there was an opportunity that you were able to identify pretty quick when you were, when you were thinking about, they wanted me to pay this and it costs this, that kind of thing. That's something I've wondered about. I've wondered if some people are just born that way to kind of see those opportunities, or if that can be taught. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think that partly because my parents, I think, modeled this. I really enjoy work and being fruitful and productive. Of course, all of our, for all of us, our greatest strength is also an asset, is also a liability, and it can translate into a weakness. So I think that, at times I've had, kind of this idol of productivity. And so I've never been one who sits and watches, 3 hours of sports games and that type of thing. I like being on the move. And so maybe that's innate. Maybe that's kind of, born and bred into, my thinking, and not all good. Like I said, there's been times that God has had to humble me and harness me in trying to pursue these things, namely the formation of a church and then a business, and of course my main responsibility, which is to love my wife and shepherd my children. So just staying active in that. But they've all been in the mix of it too, and I think that other people have helped. And I'm certainly not alone in this. My wife's a big supporter, and she's not really directly involved with the business, but she's been super supportive, and that's been cheering me on. But I think some of the need, the need to provide for my family has lit a fire under me at different points. And to be abundantly clear, our church gives us a very good salary and provides for our insurance. So I wouldn't classify myself as bivocational by necessity. It's just been having the ability to do things that I like to do. I enjoy thinking about how money and business works and how to expand that and how to help other people through that. Also, I've never had the capacity to put money towards savings or have the ability to, pay for, if I didn't have this, it would be difficult. It'd be challenging in our context and with 4 children to pay for, fill in the blank, orthodontist and piano lessons. And I love to go skiing. So, part of me just did it because I want to have the ability to give experiences to my children if possible. I like boats. I like skiing. I like doing things that,
Ooh, I like boats.
Sometimes aren't exactly cheap hobbies.
Right. Well, Chris has a boat.
I like boats. I have a boat problem. I have a lot of problems. There was other things though that caught my eye that I think would be meaningful for others to hear that have the entrepreneurial spirit. You were frugal in the sense that you were like, there's this hardware store that has this equipment that, they need to get rid of. I think so commonly entrepreneurs are, they have these blinders on or these false ideas that they need to spend a lot of money to get into it, or that they need a big office space, which, the common story is, we started in a garage, which I feel like you get an award for the day for taking that to a new level, which was, we started it in, our church planting office, which was above an Italian restaurant. It was like, I'm not belittling it. I'm kind of like, I don't know how much
admirable.
I don't know. Yeah, it's admirable. I don't know how much more frugal you can get.
But I don't know how you keep your mind on your work when you got all that great aroma and smell coming up from below.
Oh yeah. Well, my library still smells like garlic.
This is great. Our buddy Scott would not like that. He doesn't like garlic, but no, and the reason why this is important, I see so many entrepreneurs that don't take the leap because they think they don't have the ability, or that they don't currently possess the means. And you have a success story that, like so many, starts with very little. And so I not in a bad way. So I want it to be encouraging to those to hear it, so that they, they can say, maybe I do, like, maybe I could start this in, a kid going, maybe I could start my business in my bedroom. Yes. Like, please, or in your garage or your mom's kitchen, or, we have the means to do it. And so I love those little, tidbits. I love that part so far.
Yeah, that's great, and it'd be good for folks maybe to know where it is today, because I know that it's grown a bit.
Where did it go from the Italian?
Yeah.
I mean, and is that the museum of your business now, where it all started?
Yeah. Well, one thing that comes to mind I do want to speak to is that I think that when it comes to entrepreneurship, I really encourage folks. I mean, frugality is important. But you don't want to have a scarcity mindset. And just in terms of like, what can I do? I mean, we live in a free and prosperous country that rewards capitalism all day long. And if you're looking for excuses and you're lazy, that's doable here too. But if you're like, no, I think that there is great potential. If you have hobbies that, could spin off into businesses, or you have interests that could simple things that could save you a little bit of money. Whether you are a gardener, or you're good at washing cars, or particularly within the service realm, there are a variety of kind of avenues to make money with very little startup cost. In my case, I've got the spreadsheets, and I've kept a track and a log of all that we've obviously spent. But those first couple of years, the biggest things that I would say, and this is just this is the pastor side of me, but the wisdom of Proverbs is just always with respect to work, and the mindset is just peppering in like God's wisdom. And I think that one of those Proverbs 13:11 says that, wealth that is gained hastily, will diminish or will evaporate. But whoever gathers, it says, little by little, will increase. And so that mindset of patience, because you're going to inevitably have setbacks, upfront starting cost. And, I tell folks, my mantra is think big, start small, go deep. And a lot of people just have a lot of fun thinking big. And I've never thought of myself as a big visionary. Sometimes I get kind of stuck, worrying about and processing through the details. But God's provided hope and patience and advocates and opportunities, and I've just tried to work as a steward of those basic things. I would say those first couple of years working the key business, I made very little money because I knew that I got tired of saying no to different opportunities with respect to, can you do this type of key? Can you do these type of special remotes? And I thought, I don't want to say no to this. I don't want to kind of pigeon myself into like a very small niche of this. I'd like to be able to gradually expand. So I just reinvested the money over and over again to buy more software, more equipment, go to more training. And then I just talk to people. I love talking to people. I'm constantly trying to learn. And so I would go to trade shows and I would try to exchange ideas. And usually guys, are outside of my area. And there's not that many here. So I knew that also was part of the prospect. But I didn't have a huge vision at that point. But then when I met a young guy at a trade show, interestingly enough, his last name is Troy. His name's Paul Troy. We hit it off, and he was living in Central Mass, and that really was a turning point. I had already purchased a small truck, so the business was mobile, and I picked up several nice accounts at dealerships. And that's still a huge amount of our business is local car dealerships that need cars for, pre-owned cars that are going out that need 2 keys. They lose keys all the time. And so I picked up a couple of key accounts, big accounts, that I realized, wait a second, I can't keep focusing on this at this level and do ministry full time, which is what I know that I'm called to and what God wants me to do.
Can I cut you off for a second? I want to.
Yeah, sure.
I want to point out when we read these books about the successful Southwest Airlines, IKEA, they have this big thing about when to say no, when to say no, when to say no. you did something that I think is very common in the early days of entrepreneurs, where you don't say no. You take any business you can, which to the business, it may not be the right move in some cases, but I think like you, I had a very similar journey. I didn't know my big dream vision when I first started. There was something pushing me, like there's something, in my DNA, but if I hadn't said yes to everything, I don't think I would have explored enough to determine where are we going and what do we need to be doing. And so I think that, these are conflicting ideas, but at the same time, I think they both have value, and it's a part of the journey. And so, I was going to ask this question, and you're going into the segue when you met the Troy.
Yeah, you should have a show called Troy and Troy.
But I was going to ask, when did you know it was time to necessarily not pivot, but really get focused? And I mean, you said it when you met this Troy guy, it clicked, and I think that we can resume, but I would encourage the entrepreneurs they're taking the leap to be creative, to absorb as much as they can, knowing at some point they're going to have to get focused, and take their business into a very, very intentional place. But it's okay to be exploring. And I mean, we always joke about it, but we just took on as much business as we could because we had to pay the bills, and we did all these odd jobs. But I think it is part of the exploring in the early days of the the journey of how you're dreaming. And so you met this Troy guy, it clicked, and I cut you off right around that part. So
no, that's fine. It's really important to highlight. I think that there are times in the course of saying yes to things that I did that because I knew that I needed to learn. And it forced me. When someone said, hey, I've got this ignition problem with my car, I'm thinking to myself, man, I do not know a whole lot about this, but I might as well just jump in and,
Sure.
Maybe I'll get paid for my time. Maybe I'll lose my shirt, or whatever. And there were times that I did. And then I had some, substantial setbacks through mistakes that I made, and some real headaches and heartaches along the way. But I kept learning where are those pockets and what's working, what's not working, what are the needs. Eventually, that's when I discovered, before I even expanded further, I did, like I mentioned, have the need to be mobile. And so to be able to show up on site and do things was really, really important. And I realized one of the things that came into focus was that the more lucrative, what is a lucrative job that is, in terms of bang for your buck and amount of time, and what's not. And so, that might be a need, but I can't say yes to it because I'm just going to be, just banging around like crazy, and it really has less potential, and it just opens up a lot more problems. So without testing that, I just didn't know.
Sure.
And
What was the time between starting the Keys and then when you met Troy, and it sounds like that's the pivotal point, things changed. How much time elapsed over this time?
Yeah, it would have been about 4 years that I worked, on my own, very, very part-time. But as it began to expand, and then I had this mobile truck set up, I stayed in touch with Paul, and he and I were comparing notes, and we were learning the industry. He's extremely bright and very industrious, and I knew that. And I just kept thinking in the back of my mind, someday maybe this could work out as a partnership. So I was just praying one summer, in earnest, that God would show me what to do, whether I needed to, restructure and kill off some business because it had gotten beyond what I could do part-time, or I needed to hire someone and expand. And about that time, he and his wife, he's considerably younger than I am. He was in his 20s. I convinced them to move down. And I said, I can't pay you a full salary, but I'll progressively give you, I'd already set up an S Corp at that point. And I said, I can progressively give you shares of the company, and we'll expand it together. So we did that. He moved to the area. We eventually got another truck. And then probably less than a year later, we brought on another employee. And then it just kept expanding. And we were learning together, and we were just doing it out of, my driveway, and then eventually a storage unit on the back end of our property. and it was just mobile. And then we actually said, you know what, we feel like our market, our bread and butter is going to continue to be, because this is Paul's a wizard and a genius when it comes to understanding kind of the automotive sector. So it's also saying, what do I need to say no to? And then what do I want to say yes to, but I got to bring the right person on to do that. And once we had the infrastructure, then we knew of just a book of business, and then the infrastructure for running payroll and establishing business and moving this around. Then we could hire guys. So we started hiring more people to focus on certain areas, so that Paul and I could focus where we are best and where our capacities and our gifts are best suited. So we had to train. We've trained through different guys and brought them on board. Now we have 4 full-time employees. We're about to add a 5th full-time employee, and in each of those we've kind of targeted for different roles. There some of them are more generalist, but just targeting for different expansion kind of roles. We rebranded the business. This is probably altogether 6 years and 7 years into the business. Something like that, 8 years in. We then rebranded from being Affordable Auto Keys. Then we changed our name to South Shore Lock and Key. The website's southshorekeys.com. And so we, about a year ago, were even able to open a storefront, like a retail storefront. We hired another guy to do logistics and the phone and kind of manage that storefront. He's been a tremendous asset. And so that's been a great value add for our employees, our visibility. People tend to trust things that are, bricks and mortar, and then there's a place that they can go. We're still primarily mobile, but we have this storefront now that is on a main drag, just a couple miles from the church and 10 minutes from my house. It works out great. I work there, with hands-on with the business 1 day a week, and then in the evenings, I work with invoicing or other paperwork and things like that. Occasionally I put out fires or sub in for one of our guys, and then try to do some promotional stuff with sales to try to expand it. But now that we're doing residential and commercial locksmithing, we've had to learn more. We've had to buy more equipment. We've had to put more folks on the team, and it's been great. I mean, I love seeing other guys flourish and use their gifts and. I think that this is hopefully a blessing to them and to their families.
Wait, do you do like smart home locks and business locks then too now? Like, because that was
exactly
one of our rental properties. They wanted us to put some Slodge Wi-Fi smart locks on it. And I couldn't find a locksmith to do it. I bought them.
Well, now you know. There you go.
Well, I became a locksmith. I YouTubed it and I learned how to do it, and I installed, I had to put 3 of them on the house. So, it cost me $600, I think, to buy all 3 of the locks. And I think that would have probably cost me, $3,000 or $4,000 to hire Troy, and I'd have to pay for him to fly down to Florida. But yeah, I think there's a need there.
Yeah, and it is remarkable what people will pay, services for. I mean, it just still blows my mind that people actually will pay for people to come clean up the dog poop in their backyard. But these businesses
there's
actually
a business
exist,
idea.
A lot of folks could go to the big box store and pick up the hardware and install it themselves. But when it comes to kind of the drilling in a deadbolt or aligning doors or changing the lock cylinders, that's where we kind of come in and offer a service. And really it's, now we're trying to get into an increasing amount of commercial business, and that's continued to just, pick up pace and build itself out. And I've had fun. Like I said, it's kind of like solving a puzzle for me. It's nice to be able to go to a place and someone's like, we've lost all the keys, we're locked out of our house, or we're locked out of our car. You pick the lock on the door. I've got all of our trucks. We have 3 or 4 mobile trucks that have basically an entire workshop set up on the, with an inverter and lights and tools and workbench and inventory. And you can take a product and you can show up at someone's house or their driveway and say, you have nothing, and we can start from here, and we can provide, you this. And I liked selling our business and saying, hey, this is what we offer. And they're like, well, I thought I had to go to the dealership, or I thought this, or I thought that. I'm like, well, I understand those assumptions, and we can do it for this price, and people will appreciate it. And it's, I'm glad that we've built a reputation, progressively over many seasons. So,
well, there's a lot of fun things to kind of reflect on and maybe branch out into to talk about. One of those would be, do you have your kids at all involved in the businesses?
Yeah. So along the way, one of the guys that was giving me financial advice said, well, you can put your kids on payroll and hire them to be models. So when they were young, I used to just take pictures of them, holding up keys, and we actually put some of those on the wall at our storefront, because we have like our base of operations in the back with our storage and equipment, and then in the front we have a retail store. And on the wall kind of tells a little bit of the story of our business. And I have pictures of my kids up there. But that's what we used to do with like social media and other ways. The kids would be involved. But they used to unlock keys and refurbish keys and put batteries in keys and help me do inventory. Our youngest loves to come over to the workshop and do cleanup and learn little tidbits along the way and interface with customers. And I'm grateful. My kids have helped me when we had to renovate that storefront. One of my sons, my teenage son, helped me lay all the flooring in there. But as far as, and they'll go out on rides with me, which sometimes, it ends up being a lot of fun when I get to go over to Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard.
Oh yeah, right.
When somebody loses all their keys over there, it's an all-day event.
And you're dealing with
it only takes me about 45 minutes to make a key for their really nice car. And then I just spend the rest of the day on the island with my kids.
Yeah. So kind of to fill people in, if you're a millionaire, you live on the vineyard. If you're a billionaire, you live in Nantucket. So you're probably going to make a good deal of money.
There's a lot of doors in these houses, I'm guessing.
That too.
They're like, hey, that sounds kind of expensive. I'm like, well, I guess you haven't looked up what it costs to have it towed to the ferry and onto the ferry and then off the ferry to the dealership.
There you go.
So they're like, okay, great, we'll pay that. So, but including our kids, none of them have really taken to wanting to. They've watched and they've kind of offered some supplemental help along the way, but none of them have shown like a sincere interest in wanting to go into the business. But it has given them ideas about how they could use their gifts in the future,
right,
to structure a small business
huge.
and do different things. So it's been fun, and I think it's been great. I'm not just talking theology and serious talk with my kids. I talk practical, and I'm trying to build out a worldview for them. And it's just given lots of tangible opportunities. I watched that with my dad growing up. My dad owned a business. He was a dentist, had a practice. And, I had to watch him process through the heartaches and the headaches and, people who wouldn't pay. And now I'm kind of, I live in a similar world, trying to offer help to people, but, having to be firm and having to, doing fun things. My kids have watched me do a lot of bartering. And, that's been fun. I've been able to use the key service to barter for repairs on their cars and lobsters, and, doing experiences and all kinds of different things that I've, done, different things of exchange of business. And they've gotten into a glimpse into a world that hopefully will serve them well as they get married and live for Christ in whatever God calls them to. So,
well, this brings up a connection that I think would be good also to kind of explore a bit, and that is the fact that as a pastor, you're dealing with some practical realities that many of your lay people deal with every day that maybe some pastors aren't dealing with, if you get my drift. You mentioned, being firm. There are situations where, like, you really need to pay me. This is not a charity. This is, now, if you're interested in the charity, we do have a soup kitchen over here, but this is business, and you need to take care of your obligation to me. I'm going to be using the funds that you pay me to pay other people, that kind of stuff. So can you maybe explore that a little bit from your personal experience? Because, you're a pastor, I'm a pastor. We both know guys who just basically have soft hands that have never done anything outside of turning pages in books and getting up and preaching. Is there an argument to make that more guys should be kind of doing stuff like this as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased, right? I'm also confrontational, and I don't mind leaning into, some of those. But I will say, in terms of, just going back to like the relatability of a pastor, obviously it helps when you have life experiences like, marriage conflict and raising children and having to process through that and the ability to relate to people. But I also have this ability to relate to people in my congregation because I'm out in the world. I know what it's like to try to make payroll and try to navigate different complexities with business, and that's helped me connect with folks inside of our church. There's other small business owners and tradesmen and even professionals that I'm able to connect with. I think a bit more. Also, people outside of our church, which is really that's what's extraordinarily been a blessing to me, as I mentioned earlier, the ability to be involved with someone like car dealerships, repair shops, realtors, other people in the community that I wouldn't have any other reason to meet. They don't know that I'm a pastor, and sometimes I don't even tell them, but
Right.
then I find out, more about their life. And I regularly tell folks, I want to model for people in our congregation. I want to model for my children, and I want to model for people in our church. What does it mean to be a good steward of our time and our resources and gifts? But also, what does it mean to be salt and light in the community? And so I encourage guys who are in ministry, think of yourself as a chaplain to the community, especially if you're a church planter, especially if you're in an area that is not saturated with the gospel, and you're out there, trying to spread the good news and build Christ's kingdom and build your church. Like, think of yourself as a chaplain to the community. Meet people. And this is obviously, easier for me when I'm having lots of touch points and interactions with folks that I wouldn't because they're not going to come to church, but I'm there. Like one of the car dealerships, or they're a dealership and a repair center. I just kind of act like the chaplain. I walk around, I know all the guys, and I ask questions. Hey, I heard your wife, just lost her mom. How can I pray for you? You guys get your fourth kid on the way. That's exciting. Or knowing what's going on in people's lives and having those touch points has been great. And knowing small business owners has also given me all kinds of tips and tricks and insights and ways to creatively leverage what you have. I mean, fortunately, our business, this is getting off on a tangent now, but fortunately, our business, I laid out a set of principles, and my business partner is also a committed Christian. And we just said, hey, these are the principles that pertain to, how we're going to conduct our business. And we're not going to be greedy, and we're not going to be slaves to debt. And that's served us well. It kind of goes back to the Proverbs 13. It's little by little, but we've, been able to pay down debt, but also at the strategic time. Last year was a big one. We had to invest, 50 plus grand in outfitting a new storefront. And we've been both committed to just trying to pay that debt off as rapidly as possible and responsibly still compensate and, bless our employees along the way without harnessing them. So this year, because we're out of debt, we've been able to restructure so that our employees have a better, kind of a commission-based ability to take ownership and be better compensated because of our expanding business along the way. So,
yeah, it's great. It's great. So I want to get into maybe a few other things. So you've got a fun property. I visited you at your house. Are you still at the same place you were?
Yeah.
Is this another hustle or a side gig?
It's kind of.
No, but it's kind of worked together. One of the things that I did, I would say this is before I brought on a partner. I had made enough money to put some funds aside to invest in real estate, which is something that I've also been interested in. So I bought a duplex at one point, which I don't currently own, in Western Michigan, so that I would have ability to write stuff off when we go visit our family my in-laws every summer.
So stop right there. So that's the kind of thinking that a lot of people just are not capable of. In other words, I'm going to have to visit my in-laws in Michigan. Is there some way to create a tax write-off and do that?
Yeah. Well, and again, that meant I would show up in the summer and do improvement works on that duplex, and but then I could write off the travel we knew we were going to the family reunion every July.
Right.
But we this would have been 8 years ago now. We began thinking about it would be nice if we had a little more property. And my wife loves doing yard work and gardening and that type of thing. And so within our town, and this was a great way to kind of communicate to our church and to our friends and non-believers in the community that we were here to stay. This wasn't just hey, we were here for 5 to 10 years. Like, we wanted to be here for the long haul. We began looking for a property, and fortunately, the market was significantly different, as we all well know, in 2018. But we purchased a property in our town that had, and we knew that we couldn't afford per se to buy a bigger property unless it had a rental unit or like an in-law suite that we could rent out. So we found a house in God's providence, and there's tons of details to that story that I'll skip. But we had a chance to buy 3.5 acres, and it had an in-law suite or an in-law apartment connected to the garage that was separate enough. And then we had a cottage as well on the property that already had a renter in it. So that was able to pretty much cover almost the cost of our mortgage payment. And so it was kind of one of those hacks. And it has a big field in the back that we've been able to have chickens and a nice garden and tons of space.
And you hunt that property too. You've got a tree stand.
Yeah. And my kid, I have. Well, the cool part of the story was then when I approached the owner, the woman who sold it to us, we were able to get her to sell us the other 3.5 acres that was adjacent, that had a workshop on it, and it wasn't going to be developable land. It's just a long gravel road, but it was a great set of land. And so my kids can ride dirt bikes back there, and I have 2 deer stands because I like to archery hunt for deer in the fall, while I'm reading my commentaries and preparing for sermons up in the stand, praying for people and watching out for the next buck that might put his head out. But that workshop too, for a long season, it still is our fun workshop where we do stuff with the key business and other projects. But I have the key business rent that from me.
Yeah.
So that's another kind of hack that small business, with your own dwelling, with your own office space, with providing for utilities and other things like that. Most entrepreneurs and small business folks will, if they've done their research and compared notes, will find creative ways to structure it. So the business, rents that space from me. And then I own or financed it from the lady because the bank wasn't going to give me the money after just buying the house and the other land. So it in God's providence, it just worked out. It worked out beautifully, and we love the property, and we've done significant things to, improve it, and I get to ride around in my little Kubota tractor. So.
But you just describing your property, you mentioned about 6 or 7 things that most people wouldn't think about in terms of how to make a property work for you. And so, a lot of folks, when they approach real estate, they're thinking purely in terms of like it's a residence. They're not thinking about the income earning potential of a piece of land or a house or what have you, and how many maybe other kind of write-off opportunities you might have if you structure things the right way. I've tried to talk people into doing the 2-family thing as a first purchase when it comes to, and
yes.
I can't get people to do it.
Wait, 2 families in one house?
No, what you do is when you buy your first property, you buy a 2-family.
Oh, like a duplex,
and you live in one.
Yeah.
And then you rent out the other. I can't talk people into it. And usually it's the wife who's just like freaking out because she doesn't like the idea of somebody who's not like in her immediate household being right under the same roof.
But those people are also okay renting an apartment somewhere.
That's right. It's just nuts. It's funny. But anyway, but you did it. And some of the things that, people should do a quick rewind and like listen to all the different ways that you are using that property to like help it pay for itself.
Well, and think in terms of this. Where does your property south facing? I mean, we've got a huge solar array. My wife loves to garden, and the other night we were kicking around the idea. We have a well Then we have irrigation. I'm like, honey, do you want to expand your hobby? We could put a greenhouse. Maybe it just provides food for us, but
Right.
so we're already kind of germinating around, throwing around ideas for that, and we love doing hospitality, and I think that we'll always probably try to find, if in the future we move a property that will be able to house someone else, either a temporary way that we could minister and help someone, or generate some income. And we let people live there that we know and trust, and it's not an encumbrance. It works out largely okay. Of course, there's always the headaches, and if you know how to do stuff with your hands, even if you don't, learn, ask questions, buy tools. Give yourself a reason to go buy some Milwaukee tools. That they're so much fun. So whatever you're doing. So I usually have we heat our house with a pellet stove and then a wood burning stove, and so I'm constantly looking around like, okay, where I've got a log splitter, and if I see guys that are clearing trees, I'm like, hey, save yourself the trouble, go dump them out back. I'll process through that with the chainsaw, and so my kids get involved with those types of things, and I don't know, I think that folks sometimes don't think in terms of this is a tremendous asset in real estate. Historically, it's not rocket science. Is a better return, and it's a wise, worthy investment for a whole variety of reasons, not the least of which is appreciation and tax advantages. But we've had a lot of fun, and I've had I'm grateful that my wife's been able to largely stay at home for 9 of those years. She was able to homeschool. She does work part-time, as I mentioned earlier, as a teacher, and she does some violin and strings lessons. But having the flexibility has been a huge blessing to our family as they've grown.
Yeah, that's great.
I think he hit 3 of the things that I love about business. The last one you just hit, which people that know me, what I always like, what's my number 1 rule? And everybody's like, and the people that know me are like, have fun. They always think it's stupid, which I'm like, I don't know why that's the stupid rule and that's the best rule. But yeah, you have fun. Clearly you're curious. I don't think you said anything about being curious, but you've been curious throughout this whole journey you've shared. And thirdly, you've been incredibly creative. And so those are I think 3 things I'm taking away in my brain right now. And there's many more, but from your journey, I'm just throwing those out for the entrepreneurs to be, or the ones that are in the muck right now. Those 3 things. And if you can have fun, be curious, and be creative, I think you're going to make it.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah. That's good. That's great
Without
advice.
a doubt. And just to tag on to that, I think having boldness and asking questions. I started all this before the, ChatGPT days, or, firing in a question. If there are a ton of people out there who like to talk about their story and how they learned and made money,
right,
and did business. And so anytime I have a chance, whether I'm talking to a guy who just sold I had lunch the other day with a guy who sold his insurance business, just talking through with people, like, how did you get there? What did you do? What would you, if you're in my shoes, what would you advise me to do? There's people that say, I don't have time to talk to you, but I mean, you only gain as many risks as you run. So find some people that have taken risks, done, not necessarily impossible things, but challenging things that gather that wisdom and then make connections. I love it that when I have a problem, I have a network of friends that have a variety of different disciplines, from, whatever, banking to electrical work. And I've done things for them, and they can do things for me. And if you look around you at the network of folks, there may be someone out there that, hey, I don't really have technical skills, but I'm okay at sales. Well, who's to say you couldn't, link up with some guy who wants to expand his business by having a part-time gig doing, running some sales opportunities for someone. There are few and fewer people that want to do that. If you're a person that is willing to go out there and engage in some of the awkward and the scary and the risky, I just can't imagine how that's not going to have a return. That is an opportunity you don't want to miss.
Yeah. One of the things that I've really wanted to do with this show, and we're just getting it off the ground, we actually talked to another pastor out in Utah yesterday who has a trout farm and some dog kennels.
Cool.
And you'd love him. His name is Adam Madden. But anyway, he's a church planter out there outside of Salt Lake, north of Salt Lake. But I really think that this is kind of something that we're going to see more and more of. I think the days of just sort of like assuming that you're going to be a graduate of a seminary and you're going to find yourself with like half a dozen churches that are all willing to pay you really well. And you're going to just be able to kind of like live in your office and, write sermons and read books and counsel all day. Those days are gone. And I think that we're going to see more and more need for this kind of approach, this sort of entrepreneurial spirit. Like when you think about like the story of someone like William Carey, in India. This is a guy who is like today, he's a missionary to India, but today from the Indian perspective, they think of him as their Benjamin Franklin. They think of him as like doing all these things that made India what it is today. But he was just trying to, get the gospel going, in that part of the world. But in the process, he's starting businesses, he's doing different things. Have you ever heard the story of Elijah Craig? Does that name ring a bell?
Is that a bourbon?
I don't think so.
It is a bourbon. It's
Okay.
named for a preacher.
Okay.
He was a Baptist preacher from the Carolinas, actually, and he went out, or maybe from Virginia, and I think he was a friend of Patrick Henry, but he went out into Tennessee or Kentucky, and he's the guy that invented the burnt barrel aging process for bourbon.
Okay.
And so now but he started a town, he founded a town and started like half a dozen businesses that, had to be established so that the town could actually be a place that was worth living. But
That's right.
That doesn't sound crazy though. I'm like, that makes sense.
Yeah. And he was a great preacher too. In fact, he was jailed for preaching without a license in Virginia, and they put him in prison. And he would preach from the prison, and he had such a loud voice. They had to put the fence so far back from the prison house that
Wow.
so that people couldn't hear him. Anyway, fun story.
I like that.
Yeah, but those days are back. That's my theory. Those days are back.
I think they are coming back. Some of this time of this talk too, I've been thinking. I'm not a pastor. I'm not even highly educated. The seminary and higher learning in the theologic space, I feel like some people might take that. I could be wrong. They might take that and say, this is why people should listen to me. This is why people should
sure.
line up.
Sure.
This is why people should follow my leadership. Right. And I'm thinking that just gives you the ability to maybe have knowledge in this space, but to really demand or say, why should people listen or follow or, come under what you are building? I think I'm seeing more and more, it's people that are building things that have value. And, here's a guy who learned how to unlock cars and reprogram keys, but he was really, unlocking hearts and letting God reprogram someone's heart and mind. And
there's your book, Troy. There's your book. Unlocking hearts and unlocking cars.
Well, actually, I honestly wonder, there is the person out there, or many people out there, that came to him with a key that needed to be reprogrammed, but what they were looking for was, some reprogramming of their heart. And I think there is. I have to believe it, because I think business owners like yourself are the individuals that are really making a true impact on the world and making it a better place. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks for your time, Troy. It's been great to see you again.
Always, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, I get back to New England a lot, but I'm in Connecticut, so it's not that close. But anyway, is there anything that you want to say as we wrap up in terms of how do people connect with you, your church, learn about your interests, your business, that kind of stuff that we can make sure are in the show notes?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on you can find me on our website and reach out to me. It's gracesouthshore.org, or the Key Business, which is, as I mentioned earlier, southshorekeys.com. But yeah, I love talking to people and connecting, and even through some of our mutual friends, Chris, I've been able to have a chance to learn things and do some other podcasts, and I definitely want to encourage people to be good stewards and think big. I think that whenever you find yourself though with money, and my parents and my wife's family as well has set this example, is Proverbs 3:9, honor the Lord with your wealth. So whatever you have, don't, whatever you have, please share it. The gospel is to be shared. Your resources are to be shared. What you learn is to be shared. We all love to share, and that only enhances what we enjoy is only enhanced, whether it's a story or a product or a recipe or an idea. As those things are shared, that's part of good stewardship. And just be sure to honor the Lord. I want that for my kids. I want that for people in our church.
Great.
Well, you are doing it. From what I can hear from today, you're definitely doing that. So that's awesome.
To God be the glory.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, we'll see you later, Troy. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Troy.
Chris, nice to be with you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.